Shadows doesn't just look the part of a next-gen Assassin's Creed game, but everything from its revamped combat, customizable base building, and its effective use of having two very different protagonists to play as, all come together to make this feel like a tangible step forward from what's come before. If you're a long-term fan of the series, don't worry, this is fundamentally still the same Assassin's Creed you know and love, just with some playful new twists that come from some unexpected places. The biggest new wrinkle in the series, though, came part-way through my preview, when I realised I hadn't yet taken the time to climb up to one of the series' trademark viewpoints. Having spent the first hour of my playtime trundling through the game's thrilling, albeit linear prologue, which deftly sets up the backstories of both Yasuke and Naoe with the kind of dramatic flair the series probably hasn't seen since the days of Origins, the next part of my preview brought me to the castle town of Himeji. I played as the samurai Yasuke to begin with, though a quick dip to the menu screen let me swap to the nimbler shinobi Naoe at any time. The story itself will also offer up several separate points to pick between two of them as well, giving you the option to decide who to take forward in the main missions. Once perched and in place, the classic Assassin's Creed panorama spin kicked in immediately, revealing a gorgeous scene below. The detail and fidelity of Himeji's surroundings, waterlogged rice fields with the paper lanterns wafting and bucking in the breeze while spring trees rustled with pink cherry blossoms that had been kicked up in the wind thanks to the game's freshly beefed up physics engine. But viewed from up here, there's a scale to this visually packed landscape that still makes your breath catch in your throat a bit. So far, so Assassin's Creed, you might think. But then something unexpected happened. With everything I needed gleaned from the viewpoint, I swapped back to Yasuke and spied one of the series' telltale hay bales down below and, almost on autopilot, started that well-worn process of bringing Yasuke back down to solid ground with a trademark eagle dive. Only Yasuke isn't a born and bred assassin. He's a slave turned samurai, whisked away from his former Portuguese Jesuit masters and brought into the service of the well-known historical Japanese daimyo Oda Nobunaga. Yasuke doesn't know how to eagle dive, and as I nudge him into a leap, he yells and flails his arms about in mild terror, crashing down on the hay with a mighty thud and rolling straight out of it with a grunt and a groan. As he staggers to his feet with the same weight, he mutters that he's getting too old for this while he dusts himself off. In some ways, I should have seen this coming, as Yasuke feels palpably different to Naoe in almost every conceivable way. Whereas Naoe has the familiar and automated Assassin's Creed muscle memory coursing through her veins, Yasuke takes a little more effort. His run, for example, is slower and heavier. Tight ropes will also break underfoot, blocking off certain routes that Naoe could traverse with ease. His leaps through the treetops are clumsy and unsteady, and as he scrambles for purchase as he heaves himself up over scaffolds and rooftops. He also casts a larger profile in hedges and tall grass, though not quite to the point of actually making him more visible to nearby enemies. His bulkier frame is a little harder to hide within patches of shadow though, and the interplay between light and darkness does play a much more important role here when it comes to staying out of sight. Lanterns can be cut down and candles snuffed out on the move, and a new open and closed eye interface reminiscent of Skyrim helps to provide a clearer view about just how concealed you are when sneaking about. Expect the eye to remain open a lot during the winter, when trees will be barren and bushes are devoid of leaves to hide within. Maybe you'll get lucky with the fog though, as this will naturally obscure enemy vision just as effectively as a good summer grass patch. Sound too plays a bigger role in Assassin's Creed Shadows, as even moving slowly, Yasuke will make more noise than Naoe. The dynamic weather will impact your sound, with heavy rain helping to mask louder footfalls, but that won't be much help when you step inside its castles and encounter their brilliantly realised nightingale floors, which were historically conceived to creak deliberately underfoot to alert inhabitants to any unwanted intruders. Even Yasuke's assassinations are loud and messy affairs, the word brutal fixing itself to the front of every so-called stealth kill, and which will attract the notice of nearby guards and Ronin warriors if they're performed in close proximity. Then again, it's not exactly a problem if Yasuke gets spotted. With his larger health bar and more powerful attacks, he's effectively Eivor and then some, taking Valhalla's Viking taste for blood and vengeful violence to a whole new extreme. While his classic long katana remained a staple throughout my playthrough, his Naginata spear also made for an effective limb trimmer, while his bow and Teppa rifle made him just as lethal at long range. My favourite though ended up being his Kanabo club, which has a special move that can crush spines like dried spaghetti. These moves are mapped to your right bumper like they were in Valhalla though, with the mastery points to plug in to all of Yasuke and Naoe's respective weapon trees. It will certainly take a while before you're able to use them at their deadliest potential. Naoe, meanwhile, operates with a smaller number of weapons, a regular katana, a shorter tanto blade, and a spinning scythe on a chain, known as a kusarigama. Her main strengths lie in stealth, harking back to the more traditional assassin's toolset found in earlier games. These include special bells to draw attention to corral enemies to specific points on the map, smoke bombs, throwing daggers, and more to take out foes silently. She's also the only one who can pull off a double assassination and use a close quarters version of eagle vision to detect nearby foes behind doors and walls. Yasuke, on the other hand, must make do with just his wits and a whistle, waiting to see if foes emerge from sliding chambers within without knowing if it's truly safe to advance or not. Admittedly, Naoe's blows don't hit nearly as hard as Yasuke's, and I found myself dying a lot more when faced with multiple enemies with her. The urge to flee and run for cover was much greater in these moments, but that's not to say that Shadow's overall combat is necessarily worse than previous entries. In truth, this feels like the series' most engaging combat system yet, and fighting with Yasuke in particular regularly felt like a bit of a secret treat. This is largely down to each of their new stance moves, even if what they actually amount to are more like traditional charged attacks rather than the actual sword stances a la Sekiro or Ghost of Tsushima. By holding down the right shoulder or trigger buttons, both Yasuke and Naoe will assume a special attack posture that, if timed correctly, can break through guard defences and deliver deliciously gory finishes. The latter will drench the screen in a sudden monochrome, followed by a violent red slash of blood as heads fly and stomachs are skewered. Alas, one thing they've both been robbed of this time is an accompanying eagle companion, though perhaps impractical to either share or have two eagles following them around all the time. The good news is that you can still tag enemies and highlight nearby loot and objectives using their new Observe ability. It functions exactly the same as having a bird, albeit from ground level rather than overhead. There were some side activities to get stuck in with, though both of the major ones I was able to try were limited to Yasuke, a slightly limp horse archery challenge, and a rhythmic QTE kata style exercise, the latter of which are fixed movesets in traditional kendo practice. Naoe will have her own equivalent activities to help improve her respective skills too, including Kugi Kiri meditation points, which also sees the player memorize rhythmic button press sequences. A lot of activities are open to both Yasuke and Naoe though, and my favourite was probably the Su-Mi-E painting, where each hero can whip out a scroll and ink brush to quietly capture a little scene in nature, boars bucking tusks for example, or birds trying to crack open clamshells, once they quietly creep in for a closer look. It feels a little daft in the moment, but in a particularly nice touch, these scrolls can be later hung on walls back in your customisable hideout, while other paintings and animal interactions unlock petable animals you can place at will in its free-form building mode. And yes, I did go and fill mine with cats and tanuki pups, of course. The building itself is basic, but intuitive, and altogether it's a neat evolution of what Valhalla did with its Ravensthorpe homestead. And, much like that base of operations, you can visit your Shadow's hideout in person on the map, or fast travel to it in order to rest, recoup, and catch up with your recruitable allies. Allies are something I'm keen to find out more about in the final game, as they each have their own questlines you can succeed or fail at in order to bring them back to your hideout, and you can assign up to 2 of them to come and help you out on the battlefield. They acted like extra special abilities in my preview build, and had a substantial cooldown time after being deployed. Luckily, Shadows has purloined the safe houses from Mirage, known here as Kakarega, so you can more easily manage these allies in the field, as well as take on extra quests and contracts in the local area. You'll need to pay a paltry sum of in-game cash to unlock them, strangely, but they can also double up as handy fast travel points when there isn't a nearby viewpoint to warp to instead. In many ways then, Shadows feels like a culmination of Assassin's Creed's past and present, a game that pushes the series forward with its more complex approach to combat and refined exploration, while also doubling down on its stealthy foundations. Yes, you can still steamroll everything in your path if you prefer a more action-oriented approach, but I liked how much choice there was in each of the missions in my preview build. While the layout of the various buildings and spaces I had to infiltrate regularly felt tailored to specific characters, the multitude of tools I had to play with for both Yasuke and Naoe also encouraged me to experiment a lot more with different approaches than I ever did in Odyssey or Valhalla. It feels good to have an Assassin's Creed that feels surprising again, and not just another tired iteration of what's come before. Sorry, Mirage. Barring a few technical hitches and a couple of hard crashes I encountered, Shadows looks to be very much on track to become the feudal Japanese fantasy we've long been hankering for. If Ubisoft can stick the landing on this one, it will be worth the extended wait. And that's what Eurogamer thinks of Assassin's Creed Shadows. Big thank you to Catherine Castle for sharing her preview with me. If you liked this video, feel free to chuck it a like and subscribe to Eurogamer, as we have videos about video games out almost every single day. Now, I'm gonna go and bid a fond farewell to poor Icarus in Odyssey, because sounds like I'm gonna have to get used to not having a feathered companion, so I'll see you folks next time.